I sure wish it would stop feeling like I had fragments of silicon in my throat.
All right, we are back with a new installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Join me, either Petty and Gallix. Right, so I think it's appropriate for Petty to go first here, since he has things he has to get off of his chest.
So, as I mentioned last week, my cat Luna was very sick, and Thursday afternoon she died. And it's not been very good for me mentally because, 16 years and then suddenly she's gone. We are getting her cremated. We're gonna call the place tomorrow and see like if they have any time frame when we can pick her up. And then my other cat Noisy, for the past week I'd basically been camped out on the couch and she has been wanting to cuddle with me on the couch. Uh Thanks Bama, and yeah, I loved Luna like she was my daughter. So yeah, it really sucks. So just been kind of, trying to adjust to life, and it sucks, but there's not a whole lot I can really do about it. Um haven't really been doing much video game wise. Um I guess in at least good news is mom got a formal job offer today.
That's
So
good.
barring anything coming up on her background check she doesn't know about, she should be starting work sometime next week.
That's awesome.
hmm So yeah, hopefully we can at least not have to worry about that, being a problem. And yeah, I think overall that's it for me.
So are you going to get a new cat
It,
anytime soon?
I don't know, honestly, at this point in time. Like we're looking because it being spring summer, it'd be the time for mama cats to be having their babies.
Hmm.
So we're gonna be looking around because I at least have noise, so I'm not
Right.
totally alone. But the problem is I don't know how noise will be with a baby kitten.
Right. That I mean, you could adopt a cat that's a few years old or something like
I
that.
I I know we can also adopt, but like it's more I don't know how much if Noise wants to be alone. Well, quote unquote alone. We still have my mom's cat Reed up here and my sister's cat Athena.
Hmm.
So it's more I don't know if Noise wants to be a sister because a baby cat's going to try and be more clingy than an older cat,
Maybe, although
especially.
you can't. I think there are recommended ways to do that, and also there are probably some individual things you could do to try to see if they get along to start with.
Yeah, because the big issue with Noise is her and my sister's male cat Scuttle get in such bad fights. Scuttle has to be kept downstairs and separated away from the other cats.
Ah,
So I don't want that to happen with a new baby and her either accidentally hurt her or we need to keep them separated forever. So it's
You let
one of
them
the
introduce whenever they're still in the box, right? And see how they
yeah.
react when they can
It's
actually get
we
to each
also
other.
have a big enough upstairs like they can separate. It's just more of a matter of I don't know between Noise and Scuttle who was the instigator.
yeah. I think that is part of usually the recommended thing for introducing a new cat is using some kind of crate or pen to let them
Yeah.
smell each other and see each other before they can actually be in the same space.
See, it's one of those things that was weird because, like, with Luna, Luna looked at Noise and was like, "Ooh, baby," and I didn't need to do any of that. She just basically treated her like she was her kid.
Oh yeah, no, it's not always like needed, but it's a
Hmm.
way to make sure that nothing bad happens.
Yeah. So it's
An
definitely,
ounce of
Mhm.
an ounce of prevention.
Yeah.
You know,
So it's one of those things I might look and see about getting another carrier just because we do need to make sure we have carriers for all the kitties. Because
Right.
bef- Luna's carrier, when I got it, it would have been fine if I needed to grab both Luna and Noise together because they liked each other enough that I could
Hmm.
just slap them both in there if, say, something needed me to exit the house, be it, fire damage, something where we would need to escape quickly. But
just
now,
a
Mhm.
just a question: has noise been fixed?
Yes, Noise was fixed when I got her.
Yeah, okay. Because a lot of times that's
And all of
if
our
they have
cats
if
are
they haven't
indoor
been
cats because we live on a very busy street and we've seen a lot of roadkill cats.
right.
So, but we have a big enough house and with like a bunch of sun, so it's like they don't want to go outside. So that is a
Fair.
plus. But yeah, it's one of those. Getting a new cat really depends on how difficult Noise wants to be with the process. If she wants to be like Luna and just accepts her as her baby immediately, that's great. That'll make my life so much easier. But if she wants to be a little diva about it, then it's going to become a lot more complicated because Noise is very, very, very stubborn. So yeah, it's definitely I don't we're kind of waiting to see if any like friends of the family or like extended friends have any kittens who they're looking to have adopted and me meet the kittens and see if one decides to connect with me before we even think about introducing them home.
That's fair.
So I at least have like a couple months because they would still have to do the weaning process and whatnot. So this definitely isn't going to be a next week. I have a new cat, guys. Nah, it's going to be just the whole baby kitten process, then new kitten introduction process.
Mm.
Well, you're definitely doing it the smart way, albeit maybe not the most interesting way. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, the
sometimes.
smart way is never the most interesting way. Like believe me, there have definitely been like I when I got Noise, I wasn't expecting to get a kitten. But when we went to PetSmart, we were there looking for some cat food, and Noise was at the adoption center. And I guess for most of the time at the shelter, she was very quiet. When she saw me, she like wanted me. Like she was about ready to bust through that glass screen because she wanted me so bad.
Hmm.
So I don't know if we're gonna have another moment like that where I may go to PetSmart or Petco when they have one of their adoption days, and I may have another cat who desperately wants to be with me. You never know.
You never know.
But yeah, I guess that's it for me. Deluxe.
I guess it's my turn then. Well, uh, as alluded to in the intro, my throat is still scratching from the cold I caught over the trip I was on a couple of weeks ago, and that's being a pain, but it's no longer significantly impacting my performance aside from occasionally coughing so hard that I get a little bit of a momentary headache in my temple that takes like a number, I don't know, like an hour or so to go away tops. But
Mm. Are you like
uh,
okay otherwise?
yeah, no, the rest of the symptoms were only for like 2 or 3 days.
Fair.
Fair. Yeah.
But my throat still tickles and my voice is still a little bit rough, as I'm sure you can tell.
Yeah.
Um, we had really nice weather today, and a work outing that we closed early for, which was nice, but added up to in total being a little bit stressful because this is a short week, and because we had Memorial Day off, and then we
Oh
had
yeah.
this today, and guess what doesn't change on a short week? That's right, the number of timesheets that need to be entered for the personal attendant care thing. So it's been a little bit stressful. Plus, I've been having some trouble with various parts of getting my work laptop to be able to connect to the work databases from home. It's mostly been working, but not perfectly. So I have a tech support ticket out for that now. So hopefully that goes well. Also, I finally got my car's maintenance taken care of, which thankfully did end up being the small maintenance and not the big maintenance that technically you would normally get at this number of miles, because I got it shortly before 90,000 miles.
Mm.
So they did the 90,000 mile maintenance early. And while they were doing that, I got rain guards installed that my parents are going to pay for, which is great because that means that I'll be able to leave my windows cracked when there might be a chance of rain.
Ah.
Because it frequently happens that it will be quite hot, but also enough chance of precipitation that I don't dare uh, leave them open.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's the main thing. Other than that, I guess the main stuff that's been going on is I've been trying to refresh my knowledge of how to run the show because we weren't sure if Petty Fan was going to be feeling well enough to be here today. So
Right.
thankfully, we don't need to use that, although I was think it probably would have been mostly fine, but
I'm like, we don't
I'd,
have a
I'd
chance.
rather have a practiced hand switching stuff over so that I don't accidentally use the wrong music or
Mm-hmm.
Right. Certainly,
or
you
set
know,
the
it's just
background to the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. If you can look into getting a used Stream Deck, because they make my life so much easier.
Hmm.
well, this is also not expected to be a long-term thing.
Well, yeah,
Like,
it's still
so,
good. Like if you can find one decently used. Like I'm not saying go run out and buy a brand new one, but like
Well,
I
the
may do
nice
that at some point. But also, if you did completely fall off the face of the internet, I might have asked some of my friends or something if they wanted to help us out or something instead of
Mhm.
having to do it myself.
Yeah, I agree, Ben. The nice thing about those stream decks is that they can be used to automate all sorts of stuff, not
Oh
just
yeah,
your live streams.
I might have had one set up for Helldivers.
Plus,
Fair.
I can't be here for Friday shows anyway.
Mhm.
yeah, I'm like, it was looking like Gallix is going to helm this show, and I was going to have to handle Fridays because, well, I mean, I suppose to transition from Gallix to mine, like
Yeah, I don't have anything else significant.
most of my week has been developing contingency plans in case Petty here was too emotionally distraught to show up on Wednesday as he was on Sunday. Because it's one thing to have one of the review sessions canceled. It's another thing to have one of the regular shows that has a guest scheduled canceled, because that involves outside people, that involves rescheduling, especially since, for a couple of days there it was looking undefined. So basically it came down to we cannot delay guests, for weeks, months on end while Petty got his wits together. Basically the practical outweighed the emotional. Thankfully, we don't have to go into the untested, or rather, we test untested water since 2021. I think is the last time anyone other than Petty helmed the tech side of things.
It might be one of
Also,
those things we might work on it during season break.
Well, thankfully, there's also not the additional complication of having MSP.
Yeah. At least
'cause
that one you could have
I
just
don't
told
even have
Mac to
Mac
shut up and
stuff.
helm that, because,
Yeah. Like,
I'm not sure if he has a computer that he can run it from.
Yeah, like, you got to remember, Mac is kind of living a quasi vagabond lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like, look, he's trying to become some sort of solar punk.
When it would be cheaper just to pay his energy bill, but I get you.
That's not even my concern. My concern is that he's doing it in an apartment. Which,
Yeah.
you have a lease on it, but...
Yeah, like, I'm honestly kind of surprised he hasn't been kicked out yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but aside from that, took my mom to the heart doctor today to get her test results.
And probably get yelled at.
Well, I'm like, that's a separate issue. Like, let's just say it's been worked out. But the upshot is her heart is not in any immediate danger. I'm like, that's the good news. The bad news is the bottom two chambers of her heart are starting to harden.
That's not good.
No, but like, it's
at
an
least
inherited trait.
treatable.
Depends on why it's hardening.
Fair.
Like, everything that was given to her was that the only thing she really has to do is not drink caffeine anymore. Like,
well,
we'll see how much that she'll stick to that. But aside from that, also manage her stress levels, which is an interesting thing in these times.
I don't know. The doctor that tells me I can't have coffee might as well start writing my obituary. But
Yeah.
that just ain't gonna happen.
I know the feeling. Like, like I said, ultimately it comes up to she's in her mid 70s and she's doing really well for somebody in her mid 70s. So
well, that would be doubly true if I were in my mid 70s. Hell no.
I'm just glad that the worst of her health symptoms seem to have been alleviated. Because she was having trouble carrying things and getting shortness of breath.
Yeah,
And
diet and exercise, man. Diet and exercise, such a huge part of long-term health.
Yeah. I'm like, though her capacity for exercise is limited by the fact that one thing she does have going forward is not chronic fatigue syndrome, but she will get fatigued more than she used to, which is once again just a subset of being old.
Well, sort of, it's a subset of being old. I mean, there's the natural loss of regeneration, right? But
This is what the doctor told
yeah,
me.
well, a lot. My grandfather lived into his 90s, right? And it wasn't until the last 6 months of his life, really, that he became bedridden. And he retired, I think, 3 times by the time he was 80, right? He was that kind of guy.
Uh-huh.
And a big part of it is that in modern society, once you get out of your 20s, you tend to take more sedentary jobs, and your life becomes more and more and more sedentary, and so you start having muscle mass attrition, right? Particularly getting into your 60s, right? Because that's when a lot of people retire. And then they don't have this job that they've been going out and doing, and which gave them a lot of exercise because maybe they're walking around the office or they're walking around work or they're doing whatever work they're doing. And so once that exercise drops off, then the muscle atrophy picks up, and so we kind of do it to ourselves, right? And so a lot of elderly patients actually get a lot of benefit out of doing whatever kind of muscle building exercises they can do. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, right? It could be picking up a 5-pound dumbbell or a 2-pound dumbbell. But there's a lot of benefit that happens from it. It's not just muscle growth, right? Helps regulate insulin. It does all sorts of good things for you. So,
Right.
hope
Anyway,
she keeps that mobility, man. Like that's such a big thing.
not too worried about it. Like, anyway, in gaming news, I have finally finished Risen 1. Like, kind of a lame final boss, if I'm being honest. Also, I'm glad to be done because the game was starting to get into that, ooh, this is being held together by twine and spit. Like, as soon as I got to chapter 4, things started to take a turn for the Bethesda. Like, as characters' heads would start disappearing, or entire characters would disappear, but their clothes were still here, and just
Was it mostly like rendering artifacts, or was it more gameplay or narrative or all of the above?
rendering stuff seemed to be a problem. Like, but Piranha Bytes games are about as buggy as Bethesda games are. Like,
Right.
so, I would, so right now it's been bouncing around a couple of other games, and Petty, we do have to get together to figure out what's going on with Unreal Engine on my computer, because, dear God, Unreal Engine just seems to hate my computer for some reason. It's not a performance thing. Unreal
Is it a
Engine
driver thing?
It could be, because the Unreal Engine games will just start crashing, and then and sometimes they'll be fine the first time I load up the game. Second time, it'll start just crashing.
That's most likely due to the texture caching.
Which that's a drivers are borked thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Like, because it's been driving me nuts.
Right. Well, part of the reason the Unreal Engine gets such great performance generally with the high-end graphics is because whenever it loads up, it caches everything. If that cache gets corrupted or your drivers aren't interpreting it correctly, it can cause a whole lot of issues. Particularly anytime you load up anytime it has to load up an object that it can't reference, it'll just.
Well, and the problem with Adam is he's running on a laptop with a cheapo Intel.
No. Remember, this is the new laptop.
I thought
But
it
the
still had.
Ryzen,
Oh, it
no,
has. Oh, so it has the AMD
yeah,
$5 special
AMD,
in there.
yeah, it's got the AMD Ryzen 5,
That's right.
7000 series. You know, I made sure to get a laptop with some power this time.
Well, I mean, as long as you're not running into a out of video memory error, then you should. It's probably a driver issue.
Yeah.
One thing that a lot of people forget to check too is their DirectX versions.
He's running on
DirectX?
Steam. Steam handles updating DirectX for you.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Also, I am using the latest version of Windows, so DirectX shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. Between Steam and Windows Update, it should be keeping it up to date. So it's probably the setting to update his drivers automatically probably hasn't been turned on.
Right, which is definitely a thing that could be, since this laptop's only about a month and a half old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I can look into that later.
Oh,
Right now,
there's
you know,
one other thing that's a little known one. Go check some of your BIOS settings. I was talking with another streamer, Crispy Turtle, a couple of weeks ago, and there's a setting in some of the more modern BIOSes that restricts it to a 4 gig, 4
Resizable
gigs
bar,
of your
yeah, that needs
GPU.
to be turned on.
Yeah. So that basically, if you have a larger than 8 gig video card in there, that unlocks that
Uh,
entire memory block for you.
I'd need to look into it because with it also being integrated, it's using system memory, so it really depends how much system memory he has available for it to use.
Right.
like, anyway, as I was to say, so I am done with my news for the week. So normally we shall roll along into the formal interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Kikem of Gacriva Studio.
Yeah, that's right. Gacriva Studios. How's it going, guys?
It goes well. It goes well, outside of the things that you heard about in our news segment.
Right.
So, right. Anyway, I think I mentioned this a bit in the pre-show, but since we're broadcasting formally here, what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Well, I mean, on a personal level, it was just growing up, right? I grew up in the early 80s, so we were there with Atari and Nintendo and Sega Genesis. And, like I've watched it develop my entire life. I've been fascinated with it. What actually got me into game development was a bit of a more twisty story. Um, when I was a kid, we used to do a lot of tabletop RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons mostly, but Call of Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade, White Wolf, all this stuff. And it was always great because like all your buddies would bring their consoles, and that was the chance that everybody had to play the new video games and stuff, and we'd make a weekend of it. It was awesome. And then kind of in the late 90s, I got into MMOs with EverQuest. And I was already kind of really getting into the development side of stuff at that point. I've been working on a couple of different MUDs, multi-user dungeons, the old text-based RPGs online. And then I was also going to school I had went to school for music. Met my wife there. That's Bama Purple over in the chat, keeping things lively for us. And life happened and wound up in the military, and then wound up in Iraq, and kind of got out of the scene for a while, and went to get out when we got out of the military. Went to go work for the oil and gas industry, and stayed out there for a decade. And while we were working there, I was like, I had a chance to go back to school. I was like, well, what do I want to go back to school for? I already had a career. I thought that career was pretty secure at the time. Oops, I was wrong. But it was going to be like a toss up with a a mixed discipline degree of history, religion, and philosophy, or game design. And because they're both topics that are really near and dear to my heart, and I wound up just getting the degree in game design. Just had the opportunity to. So finished that at University of Advancing Technology. Finished that in 2015, and then kind of had a series of emergencies between family medical and problems, and we had Hurricane Michael came through and pretty much leveled everything in the area. And then 2020 kicked off. We had all that. So in 2021, 2021, we were working with a studio called Starlight Games out of the UK, and we were working on a 4X space, 4X space game. And this was about the time the war in the Ukraine was kicking off, right? So the head of that company, his fiance and daughter were in the Ukraine at the time, and he was living in the UK, so he went to go try to get them out of country. And the project pretty much stalled at that point, and so that's actually where I met my partner at Gacriva Studios, who's Christian. I think Adam, I think you've spoken with him.
We've spoken. He was originally supposed to represent until we realized the timing of it.
Yeah, that 9-hour time difference is hard to work around sometimes. Well, he had been working as a graphics programmer on that project, and we had become friends. And he approached me wanting to work on a game that highlighted his ancestry, because he's real big into the just a huge history buff, right? And he's from Romania, and he's fascinated with the culture of the Getty. And I had been working on a tabletop design for a while, and it just kind of clicked, and we were able to merge our ideas. They just seemed to kind of zipper up very, very nicely, and kind of our current set of projects were born out of that. We started our game studio, and we've been working on it now for a couple of years. Slowly but surely, So.
Indeed. I suppose it's worth asking how big Gacriva is at this moment in time.
We've got about a dozen active regular members, and a few people that come in and work on little bits here and there. That's not as many people as you think whenever you consider we're all wearing multiple hats, and most of us are also have at least 2 jobs, right? Trying to work through everything. So for most of us, this is a labor of love. But yeah.
It depends on your vantage point, because in terms of the indie circuit, you're actually on the larger end. It does, we get people in here who teams of 5, 3, 2 solo dev.
Oh yeah. Well, so Christian had released one game on his own on Steam, start to finish, done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it was okay, right? It was good work for a solo dev's first game. I mean, all kudos to him for that. But he wasn't happy with it, right? So we ended up pulling that one. We actually have plans to go back and remaster it at a certain point. But the other thing in our case that's a little bit strange is that we're not just working on game development. We've got some other projects that are lurking around in the background, so that the game development stuff is one subset of it, but it's a very important one for us.
Right. I also know Gacriva as a promoter of games.
Right. That's Andrea. She is our marketing manager, and man, that she runs 90 million miles an hour. She only has one speed, and it's amazing to watch her go.
Mm.
But yeah, she does a lot of promotional work. She gets around to the cons in Europe whenever she's able to. She's helped us get in and do, like, we had to take about 6 months to do some work with an incubator program, which those things are kind of a mixed bag, right? Because they soak up so much time, and it's not a guaranteed happy ending, right? So, but you do learn a lot, and you get a lot of good feedback from them. So if you ever get the opportunity to go through that process, I recommend you go through it. It's enlightening.
I'd imagine it would be different for us since we're press and you're, I don't know, studio, however you want to
Right.
define it. Like, we are the ones who come around to do the promoting. You are the promoters. I guess
Yeah,
a better way to.
yeah, it's a little bit weird, right? Like, because everybody's so interrelated these days. It's not like it used to be. You had a very kind of clear distinction between who is your media and who were the people working on things. And now most of your people working on things are the media. Hell, I run a podcast. Andrea has her own podcast as well, and at the same time, I'm doing the development work on the TTRPG. Like, so it seems to be pretty common these days, which I think is a good thing, right? Like, I think if anything, that helps improve communication, because it's always better if you can have a direct conversation with people rather than going through layer after layer of intermediary where everyone has their own agenda and their own spin.
It depends. Like, it depends on the outfit we're having on here. Like, if we're talking like to a pure indie dev, sure. Now, if we're talking to a studio who has many projects under their belt, then we find it is sometimes better to talk to, the marketing manager. Somebody
Right.
whose job is to pay attention to all of the projects that they are covering instead of that particular project. We've
Sure.
had it where someone else had to fill that particular slot, and they weren't exactly knowledgeable of the other things going on there.
Yeah, I tell you, the one position I think is entirely underrated is community manager. Right now, a good community manager is worth their weight in gold many times over, and they have to put up with the biggest assholes on the internet. Like, so hats off to them, man. Like, if you get a good community manager, take care of them, tip them well. Those guys put up with a lot.
Yes, they do. I'm like, I don't really have anything to add to that particular topic, but I suppose veering back to Gacriva and indeed the flagship product, the thing that we're really here to talk
Right.
about, is Flagstone.
Yeah.
So, before we get into the finer details, I think it is important to lay out what is Flagstone, especially here because Flagstone is more than just a video game.
Yeah, correct. So, Flagstone is kind of two things. One, you've got this set of core rules that really are just a result of the way that we approach game design, right? And when we were talking this over, we're like, well, we could just write rules for the digital game, or we could just write rules for the tabletop. And instead, we took a different approach where we're building our digital game on top of the rule set from the tabletop. Um, Similar to the way I guess you could say, similar to the way they did with Baldur's Gate and D&D. Um, except we're not really going for that kind of turn-based those type mechanics. Um, the the interesting thing with that has been that in the process of doing that, we've refined the tabletop rules to where it's almost more of a procedural content creator now, right? We When I was in college, I had gotten out of or did my thesis on um, problems with like MMO design, and in particular, I have a real beef with classes and levels as game mechanics. Um, so Flagstone had always been intended as a way to try and design a set of self-balancing game mechanics that don't use those two mechanics, no classes, no levels per se. And then when we started, like I said, when we started working with the digital game, though, we started using these, procedural game design uh, paradigms that you would use for digital, and it ended up kind of forcing me to write the game's mechanics in such a way that it works with that neatly. And we've ended up with something I think that's actually really unique in either domain, whether it's tabletop or digital.
Indeed. So I'm going to turn the line of questioning over to Galix because tabletop RPGs are more his wheelhouse.
So, wanting to do a system without classes or levels, how do you handle having characters progress and feel like they're improving through gameplay?
Right. So the question is always like, well, is always progression, right? It's not really uh and games being numbers, right? There's always the case you can make the argument that, anytime you have any kind of numerical progression, then that's a level. But just to be clear here, what I mean is levels as these like giant chunk increases in overall power for the character, right? Like if you're thinking of Dungeons and Dragons or even your favorite digital game, when you gain a level, that number is a multiplier for a whole bunch of other mechanics in the game, right? And then you typically also acquire a whole bunch of new abilities at the same time. So there's this, significant power jump between one level and the next. Um, so our approach is to get rid of the big chunk increase and allow the players to have a more granular control over what is being increased at any given time. So there still is like power creep in there, right? But it's gradual. The other thing is that the player has a lot more opportunity to grow wide instead of simply up. And there's actually a bit of opportunity cost in it, so that the more you try to specialize in one direction, you're giving up access to other things just off of opportunity cost.
Hmm. So more like there are other like skill point based systems that kind of work. I use skill points. They're not always literally skills, but you generally you get improvement things. Then you kind of
Right.
you choose where they go in much smaller increments than
Yeah, I'll just say
you got an entire new hit die.
yeah, it's a currency. It's almost more of a currency progression, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Although some of the games like that have stuff where like, oh, actually, but also your actual stats don't. I'm thinking one of the games that I have a semi-regular game going on is Cyberpunk Red, and in that game, your inherent abilities are pretty locked in unless you get really heavy cyberware.
right.
But
Um,
but like skills and stuff work more the way that you're talking about. So I was just thinking
well,
that that's what came to mind.
with ours, again, it's a bit odd. So your character progression is basically that you've got your heritage, which is your race, more or less, and whatever cultural benefits that come from that. And then you'll have your flagstone bonuses, which are like you're a human, but you focused on this or that or the other in order to, throughout your younger years. And so now this is where your inherent strengths lie, right? And instead of it being like a simple strength score, instead you're selecting bonuses and you're only getting the bonus in that small subset of the domain,
Okay.
right? And there's a limit to how many of those you can acquire over the course of your character. So of course, there's opportunity cost with every selection. And so you have your 4 flagstones. So that's uh, uh, vitality, finesse, cognition, and ego. And then kind of layered on top of that, you've got your loadout, which is probably about as close as you could come to a class, except that it's not predefined, right? The player is effectively building their own class.
Right.
We really wanted to stay out of this idea of pigeonholing the player into, oh, well, this is a warrior, or this is a wizard, or this is a sorcerer, or what the hell ever. It's like, well, what if that's not what the player thinks a wizard is?
Mm-hmm.
What if their wizard doesn't want to sit there and do fireballs out all the time? They want to do Wingardia Leviosa or whatever. D&D and Pathfinder both suffered from that same problem where you were kind of stuck with the spells that they gave you, and there was no real mechanics for developing new ones. And then the same was true for their physical abilities, right? It's like you had your feats and stuff, and that's pretty much what you got. You were stuck. In ours,
they keep making new ones, at least in Pathfinder. But yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah. Well, we said, well, fuck it. Why don't we just give the players the tools to create new ones? So we designed the system so that the players can create their own abilities.
Amusingly, when you do that, you frequently end up realizing that stuff is not necessarily equivalent in power that was considered to be in other systems.
Yeah, that's very true. This game it self balances just because of the way the mechanics work, but at least numerically, right? But numerical balance is not the end all be all because you also have contextual balance, right? If your party primarily plays combat in big open environments, then maybe Fireball is the best spell ever. But if you constantly fight in close tunnels, then Fireball is the thing that kills your party every time someone casts it.
Unless your entire party is equipped with fire resistance.
Exactly, right. So, this Flagstone plays with the contextual power a lot more. Instead of focusing on just outright raw numbers. The other thing we did it's an anime themed TTRPG, and we really leaned heavy into some of the mechanics that you would tend to see in anime, like our entire dice mechanics are based off the ranking system that you would see, so EEE through SSS, right? And that pretty much covers our, like, if you can wrap your head around that, you can wrap your head around the entire dice mechanics for the game. It's kind of wild.
I see.
Actually, can I share my screen? Or is that something we can do here?
I don't know. Penny has something open.
Yeah, I can set that up. Give me one moment.
Yeah, I'll just set it through Discord there.
Yeah.
Because I know it's hard. Like I can say that there's this ranking system, and it's probably as clear as mud.
Let me send this over to the other screen. Do I have the Discord?
While he's getting that set up, I'll just throw this out there too. So one of the things we're doing different is our core rulebook and our campaign setting, our introductory campaign setting, are going to be really open to the public, released for free. We're actually developing them publicly as well. So anybody who comes and hangs out in our Discord gets the updates and can see it as we're building it, as we're writing it. We don't try to hide anything there. And then so our core rulebook and the base campaign setting will be, to the best of our ability, free to the public forever. So that's a big one. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah. So this is pretty much how our entire dice system rolls. If you've used any D20 system, you're pretty much familiar with the format of like 1d4 plus 1 or 1d6 plus 2, whatever. The biggest difference here is that every number has been assigned to a letter, and that the parentheses is shifted one place to the right. So your bonus, that efficiency bonus on the right hand side over here, is added per die. And that actually makes a huge difference in the way the dice play out, and it helps balance everything numerically. So with one little small system, we have a range of about 2 to 189 just by base. So it kind of has its own envelope.
Neat. So my second unrelated question, that was all kind of on the one thing, is, okay, so everybody knows the biggest downfall of converting a tabletop RPG into a digital thing. So how do you handle the increased limitation in what the player is able to say they want to do and whatever, and the computer versus the DM's ability to roll with it or customize things on the fly to go with players' ideas?
Well, so on the digital game, just to set the stage for that, it is a third-person action RPG. Now, as far as the spell building mechanics, the player is more or less able to create any spell in the digital game that they can create in the tabletop, actually. With some limitations, right? Like, because we have to have some pre-computed graphics and things like that, right? But more or less, as far as spell effects and abilities and all of that is concerned, yeah, you can more or less do all of it. I'm sure we'll run into a few of them that you can't, but we haven't yet. Even things like weapon design, we have the ability to procedurally create weapons in the game, and we can make them more or less whatever shape and whatever material textures and whatever that we want them to be at runtime. So yeah, if the player wants to make their sword out of copper, then they load copper, and whenever that's what they get a copper sword out. If they use platinum, they get platinum out. They make whatever they want. And the properties of it build up from the material itself, so they actually kind of transfer up. So
I guess, like, for the swords you mentioned, is it like a ranking thing or like structural thing? Like, is a gold sword actually kind of crappy compared to something that's like titanium or what have you?
Titanium swords are also crappy. Titanium cannot hold a goddamn edge.
In this case, so it depends on the properties of the metal itself and what you're using it for. The way our material properties are set up, just at surface level, is that everything has a hardness, a workability, a capacity, and a conductance as 4 attributes, right? And even your metals have those values. So that actually impacts how well you're able to do certain other functions with them. So if you make a gold sword blade, it'd probably be crap on anything that you needed hardness for,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it would be great for anything that you needed high workability. It's a great conductor, but it's not a great capacitor.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do different things with it. So it's
So
hard to say whether
they
it's better
treat
or
the
worse.
medals like they're the actual medals, not like some games where it treats it as like a rank.
Correct.
All
We treat them as if as they're objects with particular properties, right? And it's not a rank thing so much. Now, as far as like kind of say you want to say E ranked gold bar versus S ranked gold bar, right? That would be like a matter of purity, right? And the values for those workability and conductance capacity, those would probably some of those would be higher, some of those would be lower based on what process you put it through.
Mm-hmm. And how about for like social situations?
What do you mean?
How do you handle it where you're in a room and the king has guards drawn on you, and one of your party members steps up and says, "Okay, well, how about this, king? If you can solve a Sudoku faster than me,
As
I'll
far as
stop asking you
so
for I'll stop asking you for permission to go into the mines."
okay,
But
so you're asking about influence, right?
kind of.
Yeah. We actually have rules for influence already, built in for these kind of very social situations. So our mechanical system is kind of an inside joke, right? It's called the SSS system, or scars, stars, and shears. And the joke here is that this is nested acronyms, right? So your scars is your standardized combat attack rating, right? And you get down to your shears stuff, which is your non-combat abilities, and your influence abilities would fall under this category. So you can create things that allow you to charm people. You can do telepathy if you want to do that. You could I think seduction is even in there. So if you want to play the bard that rolls to fuck it, that's an option. Um, we tried to cover our bases, right? We know how players are.
Mm-hmm.
DM, can I seduce the dragon? God damn, not again, Bill.
Well, you can, but the question is it smart? And probably not. So we actually have a keyword. I guess a little bit on the background on how the ability system works and how we're able to do this. We use a keyword system, right? So you start off with this base set of keywords that every player has access to, right? And they do the most generic crap you can imagine. Like you could run up and strike somebody, but with no training, you're not going to do as much as say the special forces guy that runs up and punches somebody, right? So even though you can do it, you're just not very effective. And then as you progress, you gain access to keywords that override these base values, right? So instead of strike, maybe you get slice or stab or what have you. And that would overwrite this one, and it inherits part of the rules, and then it overwrites part of the rules. And so you build your abilities up this way. And what you end up with at the end of it is a sentence, more or less, that tells you what your character is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it has the numerical backing from the rating system, so that you have the numbers to support it.
I see.
So it's just a different approach, right? It's more of a procedural approach to TTRPGs.
Yeah, you still can't. Yeah, if you're trying to be systematic about it, that's probably one of the better ways to do it. It's just a lot of the fun that certainly I have in my personal groups is when someone tries to do something that's, it's not against the rules, but it hasn't really been properly accounted for in advance.
Well, so there is kind of that's a yes or that's a hard one, right? So the thing
Yeah.
is that the rules are flexible like that. Your players can try to do whatever they want, right? That's really what we are aiming for. We want that player creativity there. But we didn't want the GMs ripping their hair out all the time, and we didn't want the rule lawyers running the game
Hmm.
because that ruins the fun. So we tried, but we wanted the rule lawyers like their theory crafting, right? They want to see this cool thing happen, and we want to encourage that. So this was kind of the best compromise we could have or could come up with between all these kind of competing requirements. And those competing requirements are what make game design so damn difficult. Because all of that has to lie on top of, well, can you keep the dice moving on the table? Can you keep the game moving kind of quickly? Is it too much for the player to keep in their head? So part of the reason for that ranking system is because it's an easy mnemonic. Like once you learn it, you never have to think about it again. It's just there.
Oh, yeah,
And
that makes sense.
And then because all of our other stuff is built off that rating system, you have the numbers there at your disposal pretty much at all times.
Hmm.
So that solves a lot of the, let me go look this ability up in the book, or let me go try to find this, that, or the other. It's like the rules are a lot more straightforward, but the possibility space is actually much, much broader.
Hmm.
And I guess do like some of these rules also apply to like NPCs as well? Like say the DM after when you start a new campaign, if they want to bring in somebody from like a character you made in a previous one as an NPC, would they still have the like similar stats and stuff like that, or do you have to like do a
No.
whole new rule set for making them an NPC?
Nope. So that's another, and I'm glad you asked about that. So we have this nifty little thing called the body plan system, right? Um, and this works for not just GMs who are creating monsters, but also for players who just want to come up with their own playable race. There's a whole system here laid out for how to build your body plan. And whenever you finish, you wind up with all your stat block basically already laid out for you, and you're ready to move on to that next step of character creation where basically you do your body plan and then you kick yourself back over to the character creation page and keep
Where
going.
the dice start flinging and whatnot,
Right. Yeah. So this gets you to a base level.
Yeah.
Now the other nice thing is that the upgrade currency in the game, we call them dream seeds and fade seeds, right? Your dream seeds you're getting when you're getting from monsters basically, and your fade seeds you're getting when you're clearing dungeons. Or as quest rewards or whatever. But all of your smaller stuff, so like say your spells, your abilities, your weapon upgrades, maybe a roll of the die to get more hit points, all that kind of stuff is handled with dream seeds, right? But if you want to
Hey,
upgrade,
can you double check this stream status? It just did a weird glitch out thing on my end, but it did
I've
come
not.
back.
It might be your end because I'm
it's
not
still
even
working.
dropping frames, so it might just
Okay, it
be a
was
your
probably
side
my
of
end.
things.
I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
we're good.
I've been watching. So yeah, like you end up with a baseline creature that has its own stat blocks. It also in this stat block, it actually also gives you like its habitat information. It gives you its metabolism information. It's all there, right? And just so I can move this tab over to a new window so I can show you real quick. This is a very ugly work in progress character sheet, so I apologize to your viewers for my blind self.
It's
But
fine.
bask in the glory that is game design. Um, so there we go. So, basically, you'll end up on your character sheet with just this nice little simple rating system, and of course, the GM would have his reference screen, and you've got everything right there. Because most of the time, all you're really checking for is to compare your rank versus the other person's for something, right? So it's very, very straightforward as far as the power system goes. The other nice thing this does for GMs is it gives you a baseline for every GM has had that case where that one player that wants to butcher everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now you've
We
got to
have the
build.
we have the bard that wants to fuck the dragon, and then we have the barbarian who wants to watch the world burn and brings a lighter.
Right, exactly. And then you've got the crafter guy that wants to either sell or salvage every little thing that he finds on every creature, right? And for that guy, this body plan actually tells you what that creature has,
Mm.
right? So you've got a real quick reference to like, are they getting bones or cartilage or skin or what kind? And that can be really fun if you're well, you wanted some goblin skin, or you want some really nice pelts for their so they can make a winter coat. Who God only
How
knows.
well can I turn this scaly dude into a fucking wallet?
Exactly. That is an important life skill, sir. As someone who grew up in Florida, I can tell you that turning scaly things into wearable products is a lucrative market.
Florida, also known as IRL Monster Hunter.
Well, to be fair, we sent our adventurers to Australia.
Yeah.
Right. So I suppose it's worth asking, how are you translating all of these tabletop RPG mechanics into a video game?
Well, for a lot of it, you have a lot of things like, okay, if we look at our environmental breakdown here, the same rating system that we use in the tabletop can be used as standard deviations in the programming, right? So we can check, say, the altitude of a particular pixel in the game environment, and we can determine what the biome is in that region, and procedurally generate different trees, different animals, different creatures, all sorts of things based on these same variables that we're setting up here in this environmental tables, right? And if you notice, there's like built-in effects to different things. So those can be mechanically implemented. So like, for example, if you are a lowland creature and you try to climb up into the mountains, the rank difference between your natural habitat elevation and the elevation that you're currently in is going to get you some breathing efficiency problems, and you're going to start to struggle to breathe, right? And that's all just kind of built into the mechanics. It'll actually be more effective in the digital game because it can be automated. And we go into quite a lot of depth on this, in terms of we have both above surface and subsurface in biomes and environments, including maritime. And with our procedural creature creator, we have the ability to generate creatures. Now we're working right now, and I don't want to kind of fair disclaimer here, right? Like I don't want to get out over my skis on this. One of the goals that we're working at on the digital game, and we've kind of got it like, I don't want to say it's there, but it's getting closer, right? To where we can procedurally generate creatures pretty much of any sort. And that's a bit of a struggle. There's texture and mesh mapping issues with that. And there's all sorts of graphical problems with that. And there's animation problems with that. So like I don't want to say like we've done that yet, but that is one of the goals we're working. Have been making significant progress in that direction. So that entire body plan section is actually part and parcel to how we're going to be procedurally generating in the digital game.
Now, when you say procedural generation, you mean the creation of assets and stitching them together randomly, right?
Not random, no.
Okay.
Procedure means you're close, right? Like you're going to stitch those things together, right? Following a procedure, but it's the procedure itself is not random. Right? There's no need or there's no inherent necessity for it to be random.
Yeah, it can be, and a lot of the time you use a slightly randomized seed that then
Yeah.
procedurally makes sure certain features are in there for something like a video game level or something.
That's kind of what we're used to in terms of procedural generation.
This is more procedural, kind of in the way that nature is procedural, right? So you have the environment has properties like at a base level. So we're using voxel engine to generate our terrain, right? So our terrain is 100% deformable. You can go dig in it, do all the things, which is kind of important for some gameplay reasons. But then we know the altitude of the terrain inside the geometry at any given point, and we can use a heat map to say modify the humidity and the temperature in any region. And with those three variables, you can start to build your biomes, right? And it's not random. It's the biomes are a consequence of their environment just as much as the animals are a consequence of their biome plus the other stuff, right? And it just kind of stacks on top of each other, one after the other. So, say for example, if you have a lowland area and low humidity, you might be in a desert or you might be in a grassland, depending on just how low the humidity was. But if you're in that same lowland area and you're in high humidity, you're most likely going to be in a swamp or maybe a marsh, right? Some kind of wetland. And if you're in a wetland, maybe when it gets to spawning creatures, right? It's going to spawn creatures or build creatures, I should say, that have an affinity for that environment, right? That could survive in that environment. And then yeah, there's more to it than that, but if I get much more than that, I'm going to get in trouble with Christian. So, but let's just say, as far as the procedural generation goes, we're building it from the ground up. Whenever the map builds, right? It's actually building each thing.
I see.
This is one of the reasons, also the reasons why it's just so hard to get footage, right? This is what I was telling you about earlier. It's really hard to get footage because you're doing all of your development is on the procedural stuff, not on, like, say, a vertical slice like you would typically get in normal development, right?
Now, I guess like if
And-
there's like any sort of like lore parts, would you consider like making static areas for like tutorial type stuff or like onboarding? Or are you sort of just going to stay in the procedural realm for most, if not all, of the development?
There are lore elements to it, right? So on the digital game, that's taking place in the campaign setting called Getty Legacy. And yeah, I can get into it. We're not keeping that too secret. We have it public already. So this is taking place in just after the end of the last ice age, more or less, and it's supposed to be the kind of Proto-Indo-European tribes that migrated up out of northern Turkey and spread through all of Western Europe and Eastern Asia and kind of southwest into Africa, and then eventually settled there in the Carpathian Mountain. So we have the Carpathian Mountain region, the entire Carpathian Mountain region, as the main map that the player is in, and they're dealing with an invasion from the world of Duende, which is the base campaign setting for Flagstone, right? That's the Dreams of God. So there's a connection there. The other thing we're doing is we're digging real heavy into actual Earth mythology, in particular the Vedic text, right? So that's the Hinduism, the Hindu mythologies, right?
Mhm.
So the interesting thing there was that recent archaeology has pointed to the source of those Vedic texts as that they were brought to the Punjab from outside, right? Which means that they were probably part of that migratory wave that come up out of northern Turkey and then cut east and then south through Russia or down through that region. I've got some maps for it somewhere. But anyway, the so we're building on their mythos for the lore for this. So it's kind of alternate Earth, fantasy Earth,
Mm.
you know. But that allows us to showcase that culture, which is really what uh, a big part of the goal for the design was to showcase the Getty people.
Mm.
And what kind of RPG are you aiming to build here? An action RPG, a turn-based, a party-based?
Oh, it's definitely an action. This one's going to be an action based on the for sure. We're not really interested in trying to do the kind of turn-based, turn the map into a hex grid thing. It's fun, but it's just not what we're interested. It's going to be more in line with survival crafter plus RPG. And we've got some plans to on the lore side for that I can't really get into too much. It's still kind of too early, and I don't want to get into a No Man's Sky situation, right? um, so let's just say that we have some other plans there for how the main conflict in the world is going to evolve. And I think the big spoiler I'll drop for you is the player is not the hero, right? Or the villain, right? The player is not that player's not the central person in the story. And I think that's one major difference that we're taking compared to a lot of games that are out there, where this isn't it's not self-serving in that sense.
It's going to be interesting to see. Like, not a lot of video games handle the passive observer, like, or
Well,
like the supporting role, whatever you want to use here for not the protagonist
right.
or antagonist, depending on the game, because some games pull that trick. You're actually the main villain of the piece.
Right. No, you're in this one. You're not the main villain. And in fact, it's kind of an interesting twist. There really isn't a villain. There's characters that have reasons to do what they do, right? And depending on where you stand, depends on whether they're good, bad, or ugly. And the player gets to make that decision. Like we're not making it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think the other thing we're going to plan to do is that I hate it. I hate the kind of white knight and white knight, black knight type mythos where you've got this overwhelming good and overwhelming everything's got to be big end of the world cataclysm. I think those tropes are so worn down that players actually want something different. Like, how many times can you tell that story?
A surprising amount of times, as it turns out.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love is that we really see the world in more shades of gray, right? And I don't mean that in the dark romance novel type way. I just mean there's not everything is black and white.
Mm.
Um,
I get what you're saying, like, but yeah, video games, like, I won't say they trend towards black and white, But morality systems in video games is a bit of a topic, let's say.
Video games tend towards juvenile
Like,
by design. Look, if you're a developer, right, and you go into a staff meeting, and they say, okay, we've got $10 million on this project. Who's your target demographic? Right? Like, of course, most of the target demographic is aimed at teenagers, right? Because cognitively they have the ability to handle a lot of the darker, more complex stuff, and the interest to do so, and the free time to do so. And then you're just counting on them having mom and dad's bank account in order to get access to the game, right? Or maybe even having a job if they're 16. So, not in this economy, but like, so what appeals to them is not the same thing that's going to appeal to a 40-year-old. But now our gaming demographic has gotten older because video games they were barely a thing whenever I was a child. Right? Like when I was born, they were barely a thing, right? And now the market's grown to where, like, what, probably 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people is a active gamer.
I mean, there's a lot of discussion about that, and
It depends on how you define active gamer, and there are definitely people who would have very strong disagreements of that in multiple directions.
yeah, like gaming has certainly expanded, and it's not that young people aren't in the mix anymore. Like, I'm like, but I I get what you're saying to a certain degree. Um,
Well, we're kind of
the
hedged in.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's once again depending on what part of the market are you talking about here, you know, because like the indie scene is all over the place. I mean, like we just got Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which
Yeah, my wife's been playing that one.
yeah, which is definitely not a teenager's game.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm like, I mean, it's a very French game. Let's
Yes,
say.
that's true. That's true.
I'm like,
That's a beautiful game. That game, if that doesn't get game of the year, I will be absolutely shocked. That game is phenomenally beautiful. If you haven't played it, go play it, go buy it. It's worth every penny. Just let it sit somewhere and let the music go, right? Like, damn, the soundtrack alone is worth money.
mm, like, and like I said, there are other games I could point to that are very much um, handling adult themes, like Old Skies is another one. Uh, but on the other hand, like the mobile market is meant for like pretty much everyone. Like, in terms of like RPGs though, uh, yeah, a lot of them are very power fantasy based. Like, and
Yes.
then sometimes you get Planescape Torment.
That was such a great game. That was an
Yes.
amazing. I played the game when it first came out. I bought the remaster. And what was the one that came after that?
Icewind Dale, I think,
No,
or
no,
was
no,
it
no, no.
Baldur's Gate 2?
Well, okay, both of those. Those are on. There was another game that was built kind of in the same fashion as Planescape Torment, and the name escapes me right now, but that
Oh,
was
are
another
you
good one.
talking about Torment Tides of Numenera? Or
Yeah,
Numenaria?
yeah. That's the one. That was
Yeah,
another great one.
I have that. I have not played it yet. It's
It's
it's in the backlog.
no, I tell you, one of the things I have been fascinated to see as an old geezer, right, is watching how there's been this huge push towards high-end graphic fidelity at the same time as there's been a huge trend back towards, 8-bit graphics and traditional graphics and old school gameplay. And it's really funny to watch this kind of cycle around.
It's
Yeah,
been very interesting to watch because, like, I remember, like, a lot of this stuff got thrown by the wayside because it was seen as technologically outdated. Like,
Well, it was.
It's kind of why all the Final Fantasy games have been moving towards action combat, because they view like turn-based stuff as inferior.
It's not that we view it as inferior. It's
No,
that players view it as inferior.
yeah, the either players or the devs.
JRPGs stopped being made so much because they stopped making money. Right?
Debatable.
But
yeah, like,
market forces
it's
always
like,
drive it.
yeah,
At the end of the day, market forces drive it. And the one thing I can tell you is that as game development has ramped up over the last several decades, the cost of developing a game, a kind of high-end game, has gone up exponentially. But the cost of making a kind of a baseline game really has gone down through the floor.
Oh yeah,
which has
Godot's
been
free, people. GIMP is free. You can make a game for free if you're willing to put the time and learn.
Unreal Engine
Yeah,
is free.
yeah,
Blender is free.
yeah. It is interesting you mention that because when it comes to game dev, or at least from our show's perspective, like what we usually talk about isn't the cost of making games; it's the amount of time it takes.
Mhm.
Because that seems, that's the real
Those
through line
those
on
two
the industry.
things are indistinguishable, right? The old time is money. If you're a big studio like say Valve or Bethesda or whoever, right? The biggest bottleneck in your game is not the code, it's the graphics, right? Because the
Mhm.
art takes so damn long to produce and to render and do all of that, especially your cutscenes and things. So the way they handle it, they hire a ton of artists to come in and just crunch on it, right? Uh, if you're an indie studio, you probably don't have that many people, so the individual ends up spending a lot more time, right? Because it just takes a lot of time to do all of that. It's very labor intensive still.
Depends. Like, it's either labor intensive or they're not working on it full time.
Well, that's true
Like,
too.
yeah, like we have
Well,
had a lot of
or
game
worse,
devs
both.
who are, yeah, who are doing this part time because they cannot afford to do game dev for 3
Apparently,
years.
people need thing called food and
Right?
shelter.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I know a lot of times the players don't think about this, but game devs are humans too, and we have family,
The
bills.
real hard
Right.
revelations coming here in the late night.
Well, and so yeah, it's just it's a lot of work, right? I think that's the other thing. A lot of young developers don't realize is just how much work it is. I mean, for this project, for this project,
My
me
brother in
personally,
Christ. If we ever got someone who said this was easier than I thought, I think all three of us on main staff would just die right there.
right? Because they're full of
Like,
shit.
yes, this has literally never happened.
Right,
We've
right.
never had anyone who has said, this was easy to do, it's easier than I expected. Some permutation that like that. It's like it's always, oh, it was a lot harder, or it was a lot more. It took a lot more time than I thought it was gonna take. Like, oh,
Right.
like,
Oops.
anyway, um,
That is always the case.
refocusing, yeah. Anyway, refocusing on the Flagstone video game, which I think is called what? Dreams of God here?
Dreams of God is the base tabletop campaign setting, and Getty
Okay.
Legacy is the digital game.
So it's the other way around. Got it.
Yep.
Okay. So how far along in development is Getty Legacy?
Okay, well, so as far as which side, because so this is the part where I said
I
that this
guess
development
both
is weird because the
Yeah, I guess both of them, like, since it is being developed in parallel.
right, exactly. It in parallel. So let's say in parallel right now, the rule sets is plus 90 to 90% complete, right? Like it's it's in the home stretch now. We've got one more major system overhaul to do, and then we're back to hopefully beta on the rule set there. On the digital side, we've got most of the systems in place, but not integrated. Right, integrating them is the tricky part. So for example, we can do the procedural generation um of the weapons, and hell, we can do procedural generation of literally everything. All of our environment stuff we can get done currently. Um, getting there's some issues that come in with things like pathing and terrain meshes, kind of technical side of things when you're working with voxels. Um, so there's a lot of technical hurdles still to go on that. I would say probably 30% complete on the technical side. But the other thing I would point out is procedural development is a very, very different than traditional development, right? In traditional development, you do a quick rough draft of your mechanics, you slap some crap graphics on it so that you've got a vertical slice of the gameplay, right? And you can then you iterate over that until the cows come home and you sell your game or go bankrupt, whatever. Um, with procedurals, because all of the world generation stuff is happening in the code, right? It takes much later into the development before you're actually getting a playable slice. Like we can drop a character in and go run around the environment. Yeah, sure, no problem, right? We can have a box in a map that sits there and spawns out the equipment that we want. Yep, sure, no problem. That's all pretty doable, right? But getting all of that tied together into that cohesive whole, that's a big hurdle to get through. We're still working at that. And Christian being in Romania, which for those of you who don't know, shares a border with Ukraine. Things are the world is active right now, shall we say? It keeps all of us interested. I mean, busy.
Believe me, we know a friend of the channel used to live in Ukraine, and they had to flee their home and are now back in the States.
Right. Well, as far as I know, and God willing, we don't have any incidents like that. We have staff that's in Jordan. Right on the edge of all of that, the Middle Eastern conflicts, and so we've been very concerned with them. Yeah, so it's the whole world right now getting, it's not just us. So, but yeah, there's just people are busy. This is, and at the end of the day, you run into this wall as a knowing that games are luxury, right?
Mhm.
And then that's always a reality that you have to face up to. Is like, well, whenever people are having to choose between uh, eating food and playing games, choose food, right?
Mhm.
And that's part of the reason why we focused on getting the Flagstone tabletop out, right, and having it out there for free. Like, we want people to be able to play. We want people to be able to play even if they don't have any.
Mhm.
You know, if you're there's a lot of themes in this game that are uh, say probably more familiar to a Hindu audience than to the typical Western audience. And just because of the game's lore, you know, and the way the mechanics work with it. Which I think if our Western audience, I think if they're open minded about it, they'll find something pretty damn amazing there.
Mhm.
And for the kind of emerging Middle Eastern markets and the Indian market in particular, uh, I think that we're going to see a lot of growth there, right? Because you have a lot of people that are basically where Americans were 70s and 80s. And I don't mean that to be insulting, right? Like, I really don't mean that to be insulting, but it's not an individual thing. It's as a culture, the standard of living, right?
Mhm.
Overall is not very good for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way the world works is cultural progression comes in waves, and you can't really skip that.
Right, right. You know, and they just have to go through it, right? That's just the way it is. And you know, I think that, like, culturally, you go, well, if this country went through it, well, we hope that the next country doesn't have to go through it as bad, right? Maybe they learn from each other's mistakes. But I have been seeing a lot of new interest in tabletops coming out of the Middle East and India.
Mhm.
Um, so I expect we'll see a lot of growth in that area. And then also, Wizards of the Coast via Hasbro has been hanging itself slowly.
Don't get me
Um,
fucking started.
Well, I mean, it's kind of fascinating to watch, right? Because, like, on one hand, I haven't really been a fan of D&D since like second edition. And whenever Pathfinder bought the
Oh, that's
rights
real far back.
yeah, well, when Pathfinder bought the rights to 3.5, I went with Pathfinder.
I mean, they didn't buy the rights; they just kept using the OGL. But yeah,
Right.
yeah, fourth edition. Fourth edition, a lot of people didn't like at the time.
That's one way to put it mildly.
Well, they tried to make D&D a CCG, which didn't work.
Well, as enlightening as all this has been, we are running low on time here. So,
All right.
I suppose, like, I'm not sure how to ask this because it's always a big, a broad gamut of time. But how much more, like, development do you think will be in store for Flagstone?
Okay, so on our current project list, right, we've got the core rulebook, we've got Dreams of God, we've got a campaign setting, a tabletop campaign setting for Getty Legacy. We have another tabletop campaign setting that's more in the science fantasy genre, called Embers of Chaos. And then we've got the digital game for Getty Legacy. And that's our plans to start. And all of those are being set up in such a way that we can continue developing on these for a very, very long time.
Hmm. It's good to hear.
Well, what we really want to open it up for more is for DMs and people who want to write their own campaign modules to have a way to do it and make money off of their creations. And we plan on helping the community with that as well.
Mm. Right. Well, all I can do at this juncture is wish you good luck to the endeavor, especially given how small your studio is.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, the games are Flagstone, Dreams of God, and Flagstone, Getty Legacy. I believe you can go download the Dreams of God module off of the World of Anvil website.
It actually we've tried to part ways with World Amble, due to some hiccups there, but we do have our books currently available on our Discord, and every time we push a major update, it gets updated there first, and they are free. So if you want to come have a look at them, you want to come help play test, or just join the community, you can catch us on Discord.
Okay. And does Getty Legacy have a Steam page or anything up yet?
I do not think Andrea has put one up yet. We've been holding off on that, so we kind of want to get more to the point where we have trailer footage, right?
Right. Okay. That does make sense. Anyway, so that will about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Yeah, there is no MSP until July, so no need to worry about that program. But anyway, coming up on the week ahead, on Friday, May 30th, we'll be welcoming back to the program Francisco Gonzalez of Grundasav Games. And we will be talking about Rosewater. We've actually talked about this game a couple of times over the years, but this time the game is done and is out. So we'll be talking about the complete product this time. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we'll be having reviews of Preserve, Stellar Warfare, a Nova Drift, the 1.0 review, Great God Grove. So look for that. And until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.